Despite my checkered history with the man, I really do feel that Katsuhiro Otomo is one of the most fascinating individuals working in anime today. There are very few people that have managed to accrue such a storied legacy in anime, and the fact that Otomo exists in this quantum state of being both a manga artist slash writer and a director of both anime and live action films alike sets him apart from nearly everyone. In terms of hats worn, the only other director I can really compare him to is Mamoru Oshii, except Oshii was more of a writer than an artist, only having storyboard credits to his name in that regard. But what makes Otomo fascinating to me isn't his prolific work or how highly regarded his prolific work is that he managed to do all of it on pretty much his own terms. I suppose when you create something as lasting as Akira, you are afforded quite a lot of leeway when it comes to the projects you work on. However, it still must be said that no one transitioned into the industry quite like Otomo did, from manga artist to writer and director of anime shorts and feature-length films, with little bridging the gap between them. Akira the manga premiered in 1982, and it monopolized Otomo's creative life for the majority of its runtime until its end in 1990. The only other things he worked on during that time, besides a short-lived manga named Visitors, was the Akira movie, as well as his compendiums of short films, Robot Carnival and Neo Tokyo. Can you tell he has a theme? As far as creating an indelible feeling and touch, Otomo hit the director ground running. He knew what he wanted his work to look like and what it should invoke in the viewer, and in that way, he is as natural a director as anyone can ever be. But, as I stated before in my Memories review, Otomo will always be an artist, first and foremost. And I don't mean artist like in the general sense, like being a musician is being an artist, but I mean like an honest-to-God illustrator. He began his career by drawing and writing his own stories, and I truly feel that's where he is at his happiest. To date, he has directed or partially directed 7 different anime, including the recently announced Orbital Era, and every single one of those anime he has writer and creator credits. He wanted to be the one who brought his own stories to life, and in order to do that, he kind of had to learn how to be a director on the fly. That takes a certain kind of determination and grit that you just can't help but respect. Of course, he would have never gotten that kind of chance to do that had he not created one of the most seminal manga classics in Akira, and even then, that still wouldn't have been enough to land himself the job of director, had the times been different. If you don't remember, the mid to late 80s was a boom period of anime production due to overconfidence in the Japanese economy created by an overinflation of the real estate market and stock prices, which was known as the bubble economy. To make a complicated story as simple and sweet as possible, Japanese production companies were flush with cash under the misapprehension that the sudden and swift surge in the market was going to continue, and certainly not crash and burn for most of the 90s, like it did. So they didn't think twice about the relative risk of letting a manga artist, who never directed a feature-length anime before, at the helm of a multi-million-dollar film about his own manga. In essence, Akira is what happens when you have the right man at the right place at the right time. That it turned out to be a global success is almost a minor miracle when you understand the context behind it, and also why it could never truly be duplicated no matter how hard they tried. Released in Japan in 2004 and in the States in 2005, Steamboy is Otomo's most ambitious project that he has yet released, having been in production for the better part of a decade and using over 180,000 individual animation cells. Along with its purported $20 million budget, Steamboy remains one of the most expensive anime films of all time, until it was completely eclipsed by The Tale of Princess Kaguya, which took the same amount of time but only with a measly purported $50 million budget. I know those numbers seem pretty small now that we live in a post-Marvel Cinematic Universe where it seems that every other film needs to cost the gross domestic product of an entire country. But let's maintain perspective here. While animation has, and always will be, an expensive proposition, anime was founded upon the principles of stretching what little money a studio might have, which informed and shaped the style of anime and its initial minimalist approach. So to see an anime project with a sizable chunk of change behind it is exceptionally rare. Only a handful of titles per year have budgets in the 8-figure range, and most of them belong to long-beloved franchises or Studio Ghibli films. A passion project with this level of faith and budget can only truly be afforded to luminaries like Otomo. But to what kind of end? Well, first, we gotta answer a more pressing question. What is Steamboy? Well, he is James Steam, a precocious 13-year-old boy who splits his time tinkering with machines and getting into fights with neighborhood kids who do his family dirty. While his family is the center of his world, with engineering coming at a close second, it seems it's the other way around for his father and grandfather, who have been overseas working on a device that will power the industrial revolutionized world, that they have called the Steam Ball. Of course, when one pours an exorbitant amount of time, money, and resources to the construction of an ominous-looking power source, their motives might not be altruistic. So it's no surprise that the family Steam's paymasters, the O'Hara Foundation, isn't too keen on letting a few moral nosebleeds get in the way of making a profit from their new toy, a veritable battery for the now steam-powered war machine.
It's just a little war with Great Britain.
Huh?
Combined with a demonstration of O'Hara products.
From here, you can probably piece together the kind of plot we're going after. The O'Hara Foundation wants the Steam Ball, James isn't going to let them have it, and we all politely let Otomo indulge in his gizmo fascination. But along with that, we also get a healthy dose of another one of Otomo's favorite themes, and that's man's want and need to create what he ought not to. Spoilers from here on out. Complicating matters is that while James's grandfather Lloyd is dead set on keeping the O'Hara Foundation's hands off the ball, James's father Edward has been misled and believes the Foundation's motives to be necessary in the world they live in.
What will they do with such power? Plunge the world into war and chaos.
And that very chaos will transform us.
It's idealism versus pragmatism, with James in the middle trying to figure out where the truth ultimately lies, with the soul of mankind hanging in the balance. And this is the heart of why I think Steamboy is Otomo's best work. That he directed by himself. These themes of man and his relationship to his creations has been a common touchstone throughout Otomo's career. It's immediately obvious when one reflects back upon Akira. After all, having been created during the height of the Cold War, how could it not touch upon notions such as mankind's destruction at their own hands?
There were those men who tried to harness such energy. They failed, and the destruction of Tokyo was inevitable.
Even Otomo's fairly lighthearted Stink Bomb, which, while he didn't direct, he certainly wrote, was essentially a story about a hapless idiot who accidentally doomed the entire Earth while remaining utterly clueless about it. But in Steamboy, these same themes hit a comparatively stronger chord because of its historical approach to framing. What I mean by that is, well, it's easy to write off Akira's themes because of its visuals and setting. While it's plain to see what Akira has to say about what man does with technology, both in terms of the aftermath of World War III and the Akira project, there is still a disconnect that occurs when, well, Akira happens. Same thing with Stink Bomb, except even more so because the short plays like a dark comedy. Not that comedies can't convey weighty thoughts, mind you, but they do tend to teeter into nihilist territory. And we all know my thoughts on having a point about pointlessness. Essentially, I'm saying it's the equivalent of being anti-nuclear war because you don't want kaiju to rise up from the ocean and lay waste the kingdoms of man. You're on the right side, but for reasons that will never happen outside of angel dust. But in Steamboy, its themes of what man creates and for what reason is tied inexorably, if also fantastically, to human history, and therefore has a firmer foundation for what it has to say. Yes, huge floating fortresses and manned death planes in the 1860s. I get it. But hear me out. There's a reason why it's called the Steam Ball. And it's because it actually existed. Well, not in the way it's portrayed in the film, certainly, but ancient historical records have shown that man was very close to discovering the hidden power and uses of steam all the way back to the 1st century AD. It was a suspended copper ball that was filled with water. Under it, a flame was lit, and the resulting pressure from the gathering steam inside the ball would propel it, rotating again and again on an axis, creating a rudimentary rocket engine. Hero of Alexandria, a mathematician and engineer who lived from 10 to 70 AD, described such a device in his Pneumatica, a collection of works that explored the wonders of hydraulic and air pressure. Dubbed an elapile, derived from the name of the Greek god of air and wind, Elis, and the Latin term for ball, pila, the device has since been renamed after its apparent inventor and hence dubbed a hero's engine. though evidence suggests that the existence of the engine predates even Hero, as Vitruvius, a 1st century BC architect and engineer, had described a similar device in his most famous and lasting work, De Architectura, though his account is missing several details found in Hero's work. And even then, Vitruvius was drawing upon the works of Ctesibius from the 3rd century BC.
Get on with it!
Yes, get on with the explosions!
Vegetables before dessert, my dudes.
Don't like vegetables!
The point is that Otomo didn't pull this curious bit of historical intrigue out of nowhere, as the story of what might have happened had the ancient Romans truly unlocked the power of steam and thereby ushered the world into the Industrial Revolution 2,000 years ahead of time informs the themes and story of Steamboy. If you're not brushed up on your Roman history, Alexandria was the epicenter of all Rome's accumulated knowledge. History, science, mathematics, if it was known by man, it was recorded and studied in Alexandria. It was the most advanced city of the ancient world, where scholars from all over the world would make the pilgrimage so that they might read precious insight and knowledge in the great library of Alexandria. But all this knowledge was mainly used in the service of the state, and if it didn't benefit the empire, then it was deemed of no use and wouldn't be patronized. And what did help the empire was mostly weapons of war. Rome certainly had its enemies, and as the empire expanded, its grasp on its territories weakened as they were stretched thin. To put it in Fallout terms, they couldn't hold both the East and West, and when you have a city from which most of your technological advantages comes from, well, it'd be right for the old pillaging and plundering. So ancient Alexandria was razed to the ground over the course of centuries, and not much of it is left standing today. Certainly not the tomes upon tomes of knowledge that has since been lost to the sands of time. But herein lies the great question that history asks. Would Alexandria, with all its accumulated sciences, have existed without the state's need for its possible military applications? And if it couldn't, was its fate inevitable? Must all of our advances come at the altar of the war machine? And must we be doomed by it?
Once revealed, a marvel of this kind exists independently. Even if it were destroyed and every speck obliterated, someone would reproduce it. They'd find a way.
Told you we didn't pull them out of nowhere. In lesser hands, the story of Steamboy could have easily been distilled down to, war is bad, okay? But Otomo veered away from such notions by placing James in a very difficult situation. His grandfather obviously didn't intend for his work to be used in such a way, but his own drive and need to create blinded him for what should have been obvious, which also wound up crippling his own son. Meanwhile, James's father knows that the Foundation didn't come from nowhere, and that if the technology can exist, it will, regardless of intent or which side is using it.
Sky soldiers, brilliant idea.
But seeing as how he's the inheritor of his family's legacy, James has to carve his own path with the weight of the steam ball bearing down on him. It's a lot to ask for a 13-year-old. Or anyone really, but the film is admirable in how it handles it. While there is an antagonistic force in the O'Hara Foundation, war profiteers that they are with several unscrupulous henchmen in their employment, you never get the feeling that they are the quote-unquote bad guy for lack of a better term. They're more the instigating party that gives us conflict and therefore a plot, but their role as such stretches only as far as being a narrative device. They're a symptom of the problem, not the problem itself.
These are our newest models. We call them Steam Troopers. As you can see, even a few can put a formidable enemy to flight.
Just like it's seemingly impossible to stop an idea once it's been planted, so too does it seem impossible to change human nature. Which is why the ending feels purposefully hollow, as James optimistically says that the age of science is only just beginning, as he looks out into a dark, heavy sky. The day may have been won, but who knows what tomorrow brings. But no matter how strong and thorough these themes play throughout the film, it wouldn't matter if there wasn't any clarity or focus to it. Look back to Otomo's previously penned Metropolis to see what I mean. It's not that the film lacked a theme or a story, it's that it had too much with not enough attention paid to any particular one. The focus was just all over the place. It was a veritable overstuffed sock drawer that Otomo kept stuffing more and more socks into because it just had so much meaning!
You are so full of importance!
Who knew if you kept the story straightforward and focused, good things can happen. Okay, you've earned it. It also doesn't hurt that the film lights a few fireworks.
Yeah!
Oh, the big lug tuckered himself out. Put that bowl of water away, Suave.
Huh? Oh! I wasn't really gonna do it. Really. Honor bright.
Even if you take it at face value, Steamboy still is a spectacularly realized and animated film and has aged wonderfully these past 15 years. This is Otomo we are talking about here, and he brings with him his usual standard of quality, fluid animation and imaginative design work.
Ah, yes. Let's stay right side up, shall we?
You can believe it took 10 years to make this a reality, and the proof is in every frame. It's just a well-made, thoughtful movie with a not half-bad plot. Belying its mature subject matter, the story itself is pretty standard fare for your typical fantasy family film. Kid gets a MacGuffin, bad guys want it, hijinks ensue, and kid learns a harsh lesson about growing up.
But how can I tell if it's him or me that's been...
Open your eyes. In the end, you have to decide for yourself, Ray. You alone.
All that's left is to throw in your occasional bit of comedic relief, and your stock cliched characters.
Simon, what an awful place. The weather is foul, the river is smelly, and all of the buildings are covered in soot.
You know, just in case you needed proof that this was made in the mid-2000s. The simplicity of the story winds up doing the overall film a favor, allowing for its themes to play out unobstructed. It's so that even kids can follow along and catch hip to what it has to say, and considering what it has to say, that importance can never be understated.
Do not give the treasures of science to the greedy, the wicked. You must preserve the future for all of us.
Steamboy is just a great movie no matter which metric you want to measure it by. It's fun, exciting, it's thought-provoking, it's beautiful looking, it's everything you want in an adventure movie. So why didn't it make money? The easy answer is, well, duh, anime, limited release and such, but if you weren't around when the film was being released stateside in 2005, then you certainly wouldn't think that. The commercial blitz surrounding the film, backed by major studio funding by Sony Pictures, was just an onslaught of print and TV ads, the last of which I could properly remember back in the day. Emboldened by the runaway international success of Spirited Away, Sony really pulled out the stops to try and turn Otomo's passion project into the next big thing. Or, judging by all the poll quotes, the next Akira. And Sony did this by not only heavily advertising the film, but by also casting some pretty big name actors in the dub, including Patrick Stewart, Alfred Molina, and Anna Paquin.
See, I nicked this thing. Paid myself for the brass valve, I did. And I'll put it to good use as well.
I don't want to come off as harsh, but... Miss Paquin. Bubby. Did you think you were playing Oliver Twist? It doesn't help that Anna is acting opposite two actual honest-to-God British actors, and it really doesn't help that those two actual honest-to-God British actors are freaking Alfred Molina and Patrick Stewart. But man alive, is she just hopeless in this role. On top of her phony accent, she's stilted and wooden all to hell, which combined with the limited time she and the other actors probably had to bang out the dub, combined for just a wholly embarrassing performance.
We don't have parts like this. The Steam Castle uses all American standard sizes, but this is English. It won't match up.
She just sounds utterly lost, which might not be her entire fault because, again, she was probably rushed. This was a SAG project, and since voice actors are paid by the hour, chances are that she and everyone else blitz through their performances in an afternoon or two. Look, just because Sony is writing the checks doesn't mean that they're going to spend an extra cent if they don't absolutely have to. Which is why you get scenes of people clearly talking in the background, but you don't hear anything. Yes, you can clearly hear them in the Japanese dub, don't at me. But you can't really lay the blame of why this flopped at the feet of Anna, nor the dub in general. For a major release in theaters, this was and still remains an impressively cast dub, even beyond the usual woes of Otomo's overly detailed lip flaps causing actors to oddly enunciate, like Kenneth Branagh in Hamlet.
A Zeppelin came and plucked me right off the train. They got it.
They took it, did they?
Yeah.
Now No, the reason why Steamboy flopped particularly hard here in America is because Sony marketed it like a prestige film. You would think that because of all the hype and the ads that this was a wide release, but at its widest, it was only in 46 theaters nationwide. That's averaging less than one theater a state. They treated this movie like it was some kind of mind-bending, once-in-a-generation animated epic with all the solemnity and gravitas of a Nolan film. In essence, they treated it like it was another Akira, when in reality it has way more in common, at least tonally speaking, with something more along the lines of The Iron Giant. In no way would you ever sit a kid down to watch Akira unless this was the early 90s and you didn't know cartoons could have sex and graphic violence in it. You know, like our parents. But you could easily sit a child down to watch Steamboy. There's hardly any foul language, lots of action, and it all stars a kid, which sounds perfect for a family film. It's also mostly bloodless, save for a few shots of dead soldiers, but apparently that was enough for the MPAA to give it a PG-13 rating. And there goes all hope for Sony to market it as a family movie, which it should have been. I mean, the Australian Blu-ray release gave it a PG rating, and if it's good enough for the Aussies, it should be good enough for us, god damn it! Keep in mind, this was 2005 when the MCU was still a twinkle in Avi Arاد's eye, so PG-13 was still seen as a no-go for the family, at least for the studios. So, despite Steamboy begging to be seen by every 8-year-old who dreams of owning a jetpack, Sony decided to try and lean heavy on the pedigree of Akira, and hoping that it would find a second life in home release. That just never took. Because here's the thing. Even if Steamboy were more like Akira, it could never be like Akira. Because Akira already exists. Part of the reason why Akira made such an impression worldwide was because no one had ever seen a film that looked like Akira. It broke new ground as far as animation goes, and that it came from Japan was even more shocking, considering at the time the only major anime exports were Speed Racer reruns and Voltron. True, it didn't set the box office on fire when it was released here too, but the shock and awe it created was enough to make 5 times its money back, making over twice what Steamboy made even before adjusting for inflation, globally speaking. This is why Akira has a legacy. So in 2005, it's already a post-Akira world, and comparisons are inevitable. And they are inevitably unflattering. Steamboy is a better movie than Akira, don't get me wrong, but it's not as groundbreaking as Akira, or as revolutionary, and that can make all the difference as the years roll by. Proof positive of what I'm talking about? When Otomo broke news of Orbital Era, none of the headlines called him the director of Steamboy, did they? If Akira is what happens when the right man is at the right place at the right time, then Steamboy is what happens when the right man is at the right place at the wrong time. It's an utter shame that the film was saddled with the rating, and even more of a shame that it had to be sold as something that it just wasn't. But what it was, and what it still is an energetic, fun movie that leaves you with something to think about. And that's the kind of movie I would want my kid to see. Hopefully, the Blu-ray release will find its way over here sooner than later. But for right now, having just finished this deep dive, I'm itching for something that's more of a challenge. Maybe it's high time we bumped up the difficulty of this dog and pony show all the way up to Stage Must Die mode. And there's really only one anime that deserves that distinction. Till next time.